Cool. So, quick intro first. I think I met some of you at the conference for sure, or you met some of my team, but um, I am Gabriel. I'm one of the co-founders of Runway. My background is in iOS, I must admit. So, I was a mobile engineer for much of my career, and that's true of a lot of our team. So, we're really coming from the mobile world and building Runway to tackle some pain points that we experienced at um, just about all of our past teams, different sizes and shapes and industries and frameworks and languages. There's some challenges to shipping mobile. Lots of different tools, fragmented tool chain, and also a lot of different stakeholders involved in getting app updates shipped. We wanted to make that a more seamless process, less painful, less overhead, more automated, and uh, and that's what we have said about building. So, agenda for today, um, 45-ish minutes, depending how you do on time. Doing kind of a deep dive in the platform. We're going to look at the Android side specifically. That's sort of the theme of the webinar. I'll be highlighting some sort of Android specific automations. And we'll be looking at the Android demo here. I would call out that it's a very sort of standardized flow and experience between iOS and Android by design. So if you are on the Android side, or excuse me, the iOS side, or you do cross-platform, we talked to some Flutter folks at the conference. What you're seeing here is going to apply very much to the other side. So yeah, deep dive from the Android perspective, 45-ish, 50 minutes. I'll save some time for questions at the end, but please do drop questions in the chat along the way. Much better to get them answered in context as we go. So I'll be trying to keep an eye on the chat, um, and yeah, we'll be happy to answer questions. Cool. And one more kind of reminder: this is going to be recorded, so you should get that link sent to you afterwards. Feel free to share that with your team, anyone else you think might be interested, and let's get going. So Runway, first of all, who is it for? Are you in the right place? Why should you care? We're building Runway, like I said, for the mobile world and mobile adjacent platforms. Anything you're kind of shipping to one of the app stores, you can manage that in Runway, and that cuts across all sorts of roles. I'm sure we have a lot of engineers joining us, but probably some product folks and QA. Designers are involved, marketing folks are involved, other stakeholders. It's a very interdisciplinary effort getting apps shipped, and Runway is really designed for the whole team. Of course, they're going to be chipping in different ways, and you'll be familiar with kind of how your team collaborates, who does what. We want to create this framework that allows all those different people to chip in, do what they have to do seamlessly, without sort of wasted time or too much context switching or noise on Slack. So if you are anyone on a mobile team or mobile adjacent team, chances are this webinar is relevant to you. And yeah, like I said, any really platform. We're going to look at the Android side. We support iOS. We also support sort of over-the-air deployment for React Native teams. We support teams that are building in Flutter, React Native, cross-platform stuff as well. So we sit a level above any kind of team should be able to get value out of Runway. How you set us up is also very much up to your team. I'll try to sort of give some hints and ideas about how existing Runway users kind of use us, but we are designed to be very plug and play. We want to adapt around your existing process. We integrate with your existing tools. You can configure the sort of workflows here and the team setup in a way that suits your team. We really want to sort of have teams put us to work for them and not the other way around. So there's no lock-in, and we want to adapt to how you like to do things. So without further ado, let's start taking a look through. I actually start over in the settings here because this is really important kind of fundamentals to understand, like, where does Runway sit in your stack? Where are we actually connecting to the tools and the things you're already doing? This is the best way to visualize that really quickly. We have a whole range of out-of-the-box integrations at a range of different integration points with a bunch of different tools supported for each of these. And the idea is to give you a really easy, quick way to hook into your toolchain and without any sort of in-house scripting or effort to make these connections, you should be able to uh, get connected to an integration and immediately get some some automations going and notifications and start building out this very sort of integrated toolchain. So what that kind of looks like is your version control, project management tools. Of course, will connect to your build pipeline. There's some regression testing tools you can hook up here. Beta testing or pre-production distribution, Runway can help you automate and manage that. We connect to the stores, so the Play Console, App Store Connect. We have notification integrations, of course, Slack and Teams. A lot of the comms and sort of recurring messaging that happens back and forth on Teams, we want to sort of standardize that and automate it with the idea of removing some of the noise and uncertainty that happens over in Slack or Teams land, which can get quite busy. Stability monitoring and observability analytics integrations. This gets into sort of post-release, the post-release phase, helping your team run your rollouts, automate them based on health, define sort of custom thresholds around health and track that in one place. Again, without context switching, or what often happens, you might be familiar with this, your observability analytics tools are owned by another team or maybe PMs. And so there's a whole human kind of back and forth to understand sort of how a new release is going when it comes to key events and conversions and stuff. So we pull that in a really easy to digest way. So the folks who are running the rollouts, which are very often engineers, they can actually understand what's going on without the sort of back and forth. And then a feature flagging integration point here, tie into your flagging. There's some cool stuff we do to surface sort of flags that are newly enabled or more relevant or targeting a particular version. We give your PMs a way in context to manage flags. And we have some rollout related automations coming down the pipeline to tie into flags, automatically disabling flags based on health or issues and that kind of thing. So these are your kind of integration points in Runway. And like I said, because we want this to be plug and play for each of these, we support a whole range of different integrations. If we don't currently support an integration that your team uses, we can usually spin those up quite quickly. So you just kind of have to let us know. We do prioritize that based on sort of timing and the team's use case and that kind of thing. So these are integrations. You can see there are some other settings alongside each of these that tell Runway how your team works. And so we are not too opinionated when it comes to your branching strategy, how you tag work or label work in project management platforms, different kinds of workflows, different flavors of builds you can set here. You should be able to come here, point us to the right place, and tell us how your team works, and then things just kind of work from there. So again, really plug and play, and we want to adapt to how you do things. Of course, where there, where you might want guardrails or some kind of conventions, we have seen so many different ways now that mobile teams do things, and we're very often sort of chiming in or happy to sort of give some advice or ideas when it comes to process and workflow and how you might want to set things up. Cool. So that's a little detour into sort of settings and integrations. That is sort of the underlying structure behind Runway is sort of creating a single source of truth for your team. So one of the difficulties that we have found throughout our careers in mobile, and we hear from teams, is there are tools that live all over the place, and you use them for very specific tasks throughout the release lifecycle. But there's a lot of context switching, and there's a lot of siloed data that kind of you need to mentally map between these different tools. That wastes time, that leads to confusion, that also leads to bugs and errors slipping through the cracks. So with the integrations, we want to bring all those important signals into one place, give your team a single source of truth, and a unified sort of platform to run your releases, monitor rollouts, and do what you have to do day to day. So that's a big theme here, that sort of collaboration, centralization, saves time, saves you from shipping bad updates, and keeps everyone on the same page. The other big theme has to do with automation. We already touched on this briefly, but with our integrations, you get a whole bunch of automation out of the box. I'll actually go back to our settings here. We have a long list of automations, and it is always growing. These automations, of course, designed to save your team time throughout the process. They span, again, that whole tool chain. So one thing we find, there's this sort of there's often a very singular focus on build pipelines. What can you automate sort of in your CI/CD? There are a lot of manual tasks that exist before you're even starting your first build. And certainly that exists after you sort of have cut a build and you get it into the stores. So a lot of the Git management that goes into releases week to week, cutting branches, version bumps, the sort of cherry picking and back merging that needs to happen. Runway can automate all of that out of the box for you. Of course, some automations around your build pipeline. Runway can take over your build upload step to Play Console, which can save you some build minutes. And it's also nice and non-flaky. We have automatic retries, so you don't need to sort of rerun a whole pipeline if an upload failed. So of course, automations around the build, and then the rest of the process from the stores, any pre-production distribution with testers and tracks, testing tracks in Play Console. We can automate sort of moving builds between different tracks and different testers. And then submission and release and rollout. We have automations throughout that whole process. So trying to make things as hands-free as your team wants. Of course, you can turn things on and off as you wish. But the idea is, of course, get you to a higher level of automation than you're currently at, because there's a lot we do that we rarely talk to teams having done themselves. But also, if you contemplate building out some of this stuff in-house, there's that huge trade-off of resources and bandwidth for non-product work that you're going to have to not only create but maintain forever, versus focus on the good stuff, focus on the product, drive business value, and offload some of the sort of scripting, automation, tooling in a really sort of solid way. So that's what we're trying to kind of give teams. The other big theme is that automation. Cool. Sorry, I missed a question before here on getting Firebase Crashlytics integrated. I think that's a very specific choice in that question, because that is a tricky one. Some of you will probably know they don't expose a sort of direct API for stability data on a sort of session and user basis. So we do have that integration available. Behind the scenes, it works via BigQuery. So Firebase actually has some kind of built-in BigQuery exports. You enable that, and then you connect us actually to your BigQuery. And then Runway is actually doing all the heavy lifting when it comes to running the right queries to get this kind of session level, user level crash free rates and this kind of thing. So in the demo here, we have Sentry connected, but yeah, Firebase Crashlytics is another option. That's how that integration works. You just need a service account, API key. You drop that in and go. For our other integrations, it varies how you get things connected, but basically ranges from OAuth flows. So pretty nice, easy. Bounces you out to the provider. You come back and get everything set up. Some integrations require API keys or like service account, like some of the Google ones. But we build and maintain these and focus a lot on them, of course, because integrations are so central. So our goal is to make it set up as sort of foolproof as possible. You shouldn't need to go hunting around for how to get the right keys, get things configured. We try to make that as easy as possible. One of the nice things too with the integrations, I would just call out managing sort of all those pieces. With sort of some alerting and errors that appear in Runway, you'll see when certain services are degraded or perhaps down or not in a good state. So many teams are finding that Runway creates this sort of observability layer on top of their tool chain for a lot of their tools, which can be useful. let's start taking a look through the platform now. We'll go kind of top to bottom. So I'm going to step up a level quickly, show you the sort of organization level overview. Most, yeah, just about all of the teams we work with ship a couple of apps through Runway. The most common case would be an iOS and Android version of a given product. So everything lives in one place. Like you saw before, you have your different apps and your different platforms lined up on the top left there. Many teams that use us actually ship multiple products. So if you're like a delivery app, you might have consumer apps for people ordering and driver apps for the folks delivering, merchant apps as well. So everything can live under one roof, but because the apps can be configured separately, different teams, if they are sort of separate and work different ways, and certainly if iOS and Android do things differently, you get this shared space for stakeholders that need to do things across both platforms or across all your apps. But each team can configure the workflow or the integrations exactly as their team needs. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So org overview is a place to see highest level, your mobile org, how are things going? We surface some granular data on your release cycles, where time is spent throughout the cycle at different sort of steps. There's some sort of life cycle timing, DevOps metrics, see how quickly you can get kind of work from conception or request, if it's a feature request or like a bug ticket, through to being worked on, through to being deployed. And then some other stats about sort of the work that the team is shipping, about your builds, about health, etc. So this is kind of your highest level view. Runway's grabbing all this data, making sense of it, surfacing it for you and the team. It can be good if you want to see sort of how things are tracking over time with your process. You can drill in on a platform level, on an app level, and that will have similar detail, some more specific info about sort of release schedule and that kind of thing, and some more stats there. So that's kind of your highest level view in Runway. Your engineering leadership might like that kind of info. Coming back down a level, this is where we kind of started. This is your app home screen. So if you want to know what's happening with Apollo Android, this is where you start. You will see past releases. Here in the demo, we actually just have one last completed release, but you'd see your full release history. Back through time, you can always click into releases and see exactly what went on. So, often teams tell us they might need to go back and retro something that went on in a release. They need to go see exactly what shipped with the release, or maybe something that happened quality wise. You can of course go back in time. You get that full record again in one place, so you don't need to bounce around, see what happened in Jira, see what happened in GitHub, etc. So full release history. You have a special sort of treatment here for your latest release or your live release. And so here we have an example sort of stage rollout happening. The cards here tie into the stability monitoring and observability analytics integrations that we were looking at, also tying into Play Console for user ratings. And the idea here, we'll take a closer look in a bit, but giving you a live updating complete picture of health as you run your rollouts. Yet again, this is an area where in our experience talking to teams, you will have maybe a dashboard open over there with your crash rates. Probably on another team, product folks might be watching key events, key conversions. If you're an e-commerce app, checkout events or add to bags, important stuff like that. And user ratings are often actually not looked at in a per version context. But if you have a healthy user base, they can actually be another great sign of something that's maybe gone wrong in the latest version. So all these different kind of signals of health being looked at by different people can be hard to sort of see patterns or see issues emerging and get on the same page and do something about it. So pulling all these together in one place, you get notifications as you run your rollout, of course. So you'll see the progress of the rollout and also any indications of health going bad, depending what you've configured. You will see, issues and recent reviews. So yeah, kind of your complete picture of health as you roll out. That's a sort of live release. Your next release has a bit of specialized information. This is sort of the current release that the team is working on. There's a snapshot of sort of feature completeness. We'll look at sort of where that comes from in a second. A timeline of what is happening across all your tools, across all the team along the way. And on the right hand side there, you'll see this sort of release pilot module. This is probably a concept familiar to most of you. It's called different things: release captain, release driver. Many teams like to share the burden of running releases by having a rotation. And so, some group of folks, maybe it's all your engineers, maybe it's a subset of engineers. We see this go both ways. It could be QA or product, but usually they're actually not so well equipped to be part of this rotation until the team is using Runway, incidentally. But whoever it is, you have this rotation, and Runway can help you manage that rotation with the subset of users who should be a part of it, assigning people to upcoming releases, reminders going out, so someone doesn't realize, day before or day of, oh, I'm supposed to sort of drive this release. Also for the rest of the team to understand, okay, here's the next person that's kind of the point person for this release. They would be the one fielding questions or dealing with issues along the way. Runway gives you a way to sort of build that rotation very tightly integrated into the rest of the kind of flow here. So you'll see that sort of release pilot popping up in different places as we go. Check for questions here. Good. Cool. And then the last call out maybe is in the bottom right there, the target date. So some teams, many teams, will try to run a regular release train or recurring train on a schedule, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is. Runway allows you to set up that schedule, formalize it here. With that, of course, again, reminders can go out to the team so no one is caught by surprise when upcoming targets are there. You can also set these on a one-off basis or an ad hoc basis. So if you do releases a little more ad hoc, but you still do have sort of some targets you want to hit, you can assign these dates, and it will be surfaced to the team. You can also attach automations to these schedules. So Runway can actually carry your release train end to end fully automatically from branch cut to submission and release and rollout, of course, on a schedule, and provided that gates in your process are in good shape. And we'll see that in a second. Upcoming releases slot in here. How this happens, where it comes from, depends on how your team approaches this and how your team does it. You can have next releases just get staged there. If you have this sort of recurring train, you can always manually prepare releases to get them to sort of show up there. Special controls for hot fixes that kind of speed up that part of the process. And this is actually an area that we're focusing on second half of the year, streamlining hot fixes even more. But there are already some shortcuts to get you started in the right place. Runway can immediately create the hotfix branch from your last tag, so your code is started in the right spot. Immediately bump the version on that branch or the version name in the Android case, that kind of thing. So some shortcuts for getting releases staged here, and you can always shift stuff around. Runway is also looking at the outside world. So oftentimes when teams are just getting started, they want Runway to kind of sit here in read-only mode and reflect the state of the outside world, but maybe not take so much action or do right actions. So it's a great way to get started. You plug us in, we see what's happening in the outside world. If we see a new draft in a prod track in Play Console, for example, or if we see a new fixed version or label appear in Jira, we will pull that in and create that sort of release around it. So yeah, there's this kind of two-way street where Runway's watching and responds, and also Runway, of course, can take action. Great. So we've clicked down a level into an active release cycle. So this is the release that's kind of in progress that the team is working through. The first thing that you will notice is on the left, that sort of timeline. This is your team's kind of release workflow, high level steps that you'll be working your way through. Certainly not in sequence. Things will be happening in parallel, and this is where a lot of the noise and confusion can come from as you run releases. We want to give you the at-a-glance view of where each of these steps in the process stand. Good to go, pending work. Maybe there's blockers. Easily surfaced for the team, and of course, in each step places for different folks on the team to chip away at the stuff that has to be done throughout the release cycle, from kickoff to release. So we'll run through each of these in a bit of detail. The three items at the top are sort of higher level views. One here is an overview, of course. So release is specific. It's a good place for stakeholders and product owners and different contributing teams to sort of get a quick read on what's happening and what you're shipping. So you see some details on the code you're shipping, on contributors, what's happening with your builds along the way. Do you have a lot of failing builds? Are you pretty good? Changed files and this kind of thing. So your first quick glance at what all is happening, and again a complete timeline of what's happening for the release across all these steps across your tools, etc. You'll see target dates highlighted there, and yeah, rollout step. We're going to look at the live release after this. That will be active once you ship. And the feature flags view here, like I mentioned briefly, pulling the state of your flags, trying to sort of make sense of them alongside releases. Of course, kind of the whole point of feature flags is it's not one-to-one with binary releases, it's decoupled. But there are cases where certain flags are relevant to a given binary release. You set a min version or target on a flag, or maybe a flag was newly enabled as you shipped a given release. We try to highlight these special cases and surface, of course, all your variations, and give you a nice, clean, easy way also to toggle flags. So a nice thing here in that spirit of getting the different sort of stakeholders or contributors, giving them access to do what they need to do. PMs or other folks can come in here in context and easily sort of adjust relevant flags if needed. Some questions. Partial release. Yeah. Yes and no. I think it depends a little on how you are doing this. We can't target. Actually, this isn't true. So pre-production, if you're doing targeting with different tracks, I don't know if you're referring to this, but tracks and user groups, you can manage that in Runway, and we'll see that on what we call the beta testing step. So anything sort of pre-production, you should be able to manage that here in Runway, moving builds across tracks, but also assigning test groups and stuff. The other question, differentiate between beta and production. Yeah, so that lives within a release cycle. So within this release 1.1.0, you could be shipping, you could be creating some RCs and shipping some beta releases. That will be playing out in this release cycle, just the first kind of steps there, up to basically beta testing, I guess. And you'll have a little feedback loop there with testing, validating builds, getting feedback from beta users, perhaps adding fixes or adding work, shipping a new beta, and sort of continuing that way. And then when beta is in good shape, you will get the sign-offs that your team wants, which you can configure. And then, of course, you can advance through the rest of the process by actually submitting, getting a build onto your prod track and sending it out to the wider world. There's a comment. Yeah, so if by partial release, you mean the staged rollout, then yes, absolutely. You can control your staged rollouts in Runway, and we can also automate them. So one of the gripes from the Android side that we always hear is the fact that you need to go to Play Console every day, that you want to sort of increment your stage rollout, update a number in a box. That's no fun, and that's a huge context switch for a week after your release, depending how you want to roll out. You can automate that in Runway. There's a custom sort of schedule that you can set up. You can have it mimic iOS. So you can do a 7-day, you can match the percentages. Some teams like to do their iOS and Android releases kind of in tandem, in sync. Runway helps you do that. But you can, of course, set up any kind of custom schedule here, and we'll manage the rollout for you. Yeah. Cool. So running through the release workflow here quickly. Again, themes to keep in mind: single source of truth, get everyone on the same page. Again, you've probably seen some flavor of the back and forth that happens on Slack with, I don't know, PMs, different feature teams that are contributing to a release, QA. There's a lot of sort of check-ins and steps and making sure that things are good to go throughout the process. A lot of that doesn't have to be this sort of back and forth poking people for information. That information should live in one place and should be accessible by all. It could also be, sent into Slack automatically to certain channels, but there's a lot of wasted time there with this sort of ad hoc approach. So throughout this flow, bringing everything into one place, digesting the information for you. The other big theme is automation. So I'll try to highlight some of the automations as we go here, but I also encourage you to check out our website. We have a full list of automations there. And like I said, we're always adding some, and we like to hear requests for new automations too. So you can reach out and let us know. All right, starting off the flow here, kickoff. A lot of the beginning part of a release cycle, some of the get busy work, cutting a release branch, bumping or adjusting the version name in the package, creating a new fixed version in Jira. Perhaps for some teams that sort of create release specific Slack channels, we can create your new Slack channel for the release. All these kind of like beginning steps can be automated from here or manually triggered if you prefer as you get ready to kick off the process. You can see all these steps. They have the sort of, or you will see, they all have this automation tab. You can see the status of step relevant automations. You can adjust some of the settings here. A lot of the prep work as well you need to do in like Play Console, like creating a draft in the prod track. We can take care of all of that for you. This other tab is also a common element on all the steps. This is what we call our sort of checklist. This is fully customizable by your team. The idea is to replace something you probably already have that probably lives in a Confluence doc or in a Google Doc or a spreadsheet. I've used many of these before. Release checklists that folks need to run through to make sure they're kind of doing the necessary steps, triggering the right actions along the way, updating and notifying the right stakeholders that stuff is happening. A lot of that Runway is going to actually just take over for you, but there are always little custom steps that are unique to your team. You should be able to capture those sort of in this workflow, make sure things are getting done at the right sort of part of the cycle by the right person, and make it really easy to understand kind of who has done what and when items are outstanding. So these are items, again, that you can customize. You can assign owners, specific people, or different user roles or groups of users. You can have reminders get sent out to folks, so you don't have to, do the whole chasing down or playing traffic cop. And you can also extend outwards or feed information into Runway using these checklist items is a popular way to sort of further customize the flow. Runway offers an API and also webhooks. And so we see teams using these checklist items to either have stuff update here and then trigger out into their something else in their stack, other automations or other tools. Or you can feed information in, update these gates based on maybe end-to-end tests that are running elsewhere or some external testing that's happening. You can sort of feed information in and create a really kind of customized flow that's really dynamic and reflecting kind of what all is happening. So checklist items, you'll see those on every step as we go. You can see the release pilot is called out here again, and a release description. This is for internal facing release notes. So any highlights or important kind of call outs for the release, this will be surfaced internally to the team in certain reminders and notifications, and also in some comms as you ship. So you can create that as you go. The feature readiness step here is a favorite. This has a lot to do with sort of understanding exactly what work is shipping, understanding if there is some work that is shipping that isn't actually ready to go. Or the flip side, understand if there's some work that does need to ship with this release, maybe a fix for a show-stopping bug. That work is not actually ready or in the diff. And so you'll see already there's, ticket information here, in this case from Jira. there's code information. Um, those are the two big kind of decoupled sources of data when it comes to what is shipping in a release or what is expected to ship in a release. So we bring that together and we try to do some smart stuff to like do that mental mapping, understand what items should be where, flag inconsistent states or issues with these work items, and some automations as well. So you can see there's different flavors of items here. We boil it down into a done, not done sort of bucketing. So PMs and contributing teams can come here and understand exactly where things stand. You might have code that got merged too quickly. QA is still doing their thing, and that's reflected on the ticket side. If you had a PM or QA looking at Jira and you had engineers looking at the diff in GitHub, they would come to very different conclusions about that piece of work. So pulling those together and giving people the full understanding of where things are at. You could have work that has been labeled for the release, maybe like a show-stopping bug, like the one I'm hovering over, but the fixed has not made its way onto the release branch yet, let's say. You will see that happen. You'll see that work as it approaches, as a PR gets opened, as it gets merged. So you can get a really good um, active pulse on um, all the work, where it stands, and how ready you are to ship. Items move over into the done column here, of course. And then Runway annotates with a lot of other information. So you'll see a lot about who is contributing work, that kind of stuff. You'll also see builds, the latest build that contains a piece of work. If it has been built, you also see if it hasn't yet been built. That's also important info. We also do some cool stuff with stability monitoring, where we can trace issues that are found through to items of work that may have contributed, based on the stack trace and the ticket stuff as well on there. Cool. And then a automation to call out here, adding missing labels or fixed versions is quite likely that your team has some sort of practice already for labeling your work in your project management tool. So either before you release or maybe after you release, making sure that the work on the ticket side that shipped is associated with the release it shipped in. That's very often a manual task that engineers need to remember to do, label their tickets, or someone else is having to go through and do that. Runway can do this automatically based on what we see shipping. So that's a really nice time saver, and it also makes sure there's no holes in the project management side. So if you have PMs or other folks looking there trying to understand what did you release, Runway will make sure that picture is complete. Other automations here actually are favorites, more the git management. So as you're in a release cycle, maybe that scenario before where you're sort of pre-production, you're shipping some RCs, maybe to beta, you need some fixes in there. Runway has some automations to help you with that process, getting fixes onto the release branch, or back merging, depending on your approach. Cool. Next few steps here have to do with builds. So kind of sitting on top of your build pipeline, the build flavor that you've pointed us to, and you can point us to different ones. We will surface, of course, build history here, kind of metadata and info about your builds, and then some automations as well. So that would be things like the upload automation, like I mentioned. We can grab artifacts and also surface them if you wish. And yeah, the sort of mapping you can see from store build to CI build. Just a little thing that's worth calling out, depending how your team does build numbering and where your builds are appearing, this is another one of those things that can create confusion, especially when you are trying to sort of communicate about builds with non-technical folks or QA. Runway does that sort of mapping between a distributed store build and the CI build. And you'll see this mapping throughout the flow wherever we talk about builds, to make sure people are on the same page. Regression testing here is sort of a quality gate for your QA folks, or maybe for teams themselves that are doing QA. There are a few elements here. One is this high level status on the step, for people to understand really clearly what build has been validated, what build has sort of passed regression and is going to be moving ahead. This is a selector, there's different statuses, trying to open up that black box when you have QA running a regression on a complicated app. it can take a long time, day or days. So we want to make that more visible to the team where things stand. There's different ways to update this, and updates go into Slack as well. Integrations, if your QA team is using a tool for running regression, Runway can actually pull that in and surface the status of regression runs along the way. And the items below, similar to checklist items, we see teams use this for building out any custom regression scripts if you want to just not use a simple spreadsheet, or for different sign-offs from different testers or different teams, different feature teams that might be contributing. So depending on how your team works, you might have different feature teams that should be kind of validating and signing off on their own work. This is one way to build that into your flow with all the same, reminders and streamlining that goes into the other checklist items as well. The beta testing step, more broadly, really, this is a pre-production sort of build step. Anything you're distributing pre-prod will show up here. You'll see a build history. You will have all the controls you should need to move builds between tracks and to assign groups of testers. So whether manual or automated, there's some automations where Runway can automatically send new builds of this flavor to your initial testing track, for example. Just a few things to allow you to control everything in place here without needing to go to Play Console all the time, or also automate a lot of this stuff. You can control tester notes and that kind of thing. Screenshots, metadata, pretty self-explanatory, but allowing you to update these again here. One of the big value adds that we find, and you might experience this, is this disconnect between the folks that need to update this information, screenshots, metadata. Maybe it's a PM, maybe it's marketing folks. And what that usually means is this round trip where engineers realize, oftentimes too late, that they need an updated screenshot, or maybe they need some release notes for the release. And then there's this game of telephone to go to your PM, to go to your marketing folks to get that updated. They hand it back to you. Then you need to go to Play Console and do the update. So you can kind of shorten that process and speed it up in a few ways. Reminders will go out as soon as this information can be edited. So you can direct that at the sort of teams that handle this stuff. You can also give scoped access in Runway to those folks directly. And that's part of this whole sort of collaboration model that we really, really love helping teams with, is allowing people that need to do something, give them the ability, the agency to do that in a sort of safeguarded way. That doesn't mean giving everyone access to Play Console. What it means is giving them access to Runway with scoped roles that will allow them to, for example, just come here, update what's new text, update screenshots in a really foolproof way, and without you needing to provision access for everyone to the stores as well. This approval step is entirely for teams to customize. We see teams do some cool stuff here. It can take different forms. One, if you are on, again, a larger team or a team that has sort of different feature-based contributing teams, this is a place to maybe build in a consensus sort of building process in the flow. This is the kind of thing that often happens in Slack. You might be familiar with this. As you get ready to release, you just kind of ping different product owners or different feature teams and make sure they're kind of okay with moving ahead. This formalizes that process, makes it easier. It also doesn't require that you do a lot of chasing people down. So the same shortcuts here for pinging outstanding approval items to remind people, or automatic reminders going out. You get a really clear picture of who is signing off and when. If you're in like a regulated space, or you have folks who want this sort of tracked, this is a really good way to do that. The other thing we see here is less about feature-based teams, more about different stakeholders. So maybe it's like a team lead, maybe it's security compliance folks, ways to add additional gates, again, in the process. Which brings us to the submission step. This is sort of a special transition. You see that in the timeline. So all those steps preceding this one They play a role in the overall flow, especially if you want to enable automatic submission. And so the thing we were talking about earlier with scheduled submission dates, you can also have an automatic submit on green. So if all these steps transition to a green status, things are getting done, things are in good shape, you can also automatically then submit and release um, when that happens. So this is sort of a transition point where you can build out a flow that allows you to submit and release automatically when you get there, or you can do it manually, of course. And so this is what it looks like. You have your sort of submission step. You can select whatever build that you actually want to promote to prod. You can adjust your rollout settings, and you can go ahead and submit right from here through to release. A lot of the post-release cleanup that needs to happen, you can also have Runway handle. So tagging, deleting, branches, marking releases completed in project management tools, etc. So some of the busy work that happens at the end of the process, you can handle as well. I see we're running short on time here. Any questions on the release sort of workflow? I'll keep an eye out in the chat, and I will take us over to really quickly two last areas of the platform. One, rollouts. For running your staged rollouts, it gets a dedicated sort of space in Runway. Here again, you see the same info, the sort of health metrics surfaced. You define thresholds around these. So your team can say, this is what a normal add to bag kind of conversion rate looks like. And you define that. Runway will highlight if that metric for this release is in good shape or bad shape. Alerting can go out, and you can also automate rollouts based on health. So these are both disabled right now, but based on these different thresholds you define, Runway can actually automatically stop your staged rollout, or also accelerate it if your release is healthy, and you want to get it out to more people. Live info as you go, so your team can really be just like keeping tabs on this and see how things are tracking along the way. And build distro. This is a very last minute kind of big departure, but wanted to highlight it quickly. We recently launched a sort of entirely new area of the platform to help teams with their internal build distribution. So anything pre-production, kind of an alternative to using Google Play testing tracks or Firebase app distribution or App Center. The idea, make this super easy to set up, super easy to create different spaces for different build flavors. One of the tricky things with a lot of the existing options is a lot of different build flavors end up landing in the same place, and it's hard for folks to understand where to go to grab a particular kind of build. So with Build Distro here, you can create what we call build buckets that are defined by a few different rules. So it can be branch based, it can be based on PRs, it can be pointing to a particular workflow. And we separate these out, we grab them from CI automatically. We also surface quick install links here in Slack. They can also get attached, commented on PRs. So for like feature builds or nightly builds, also RCs, making it really easy for the whole team to grab these builds and test them more often and more easily. So that very quickly is build distro, and I'm going to leave it there. Sorry, I was a little rushed at the end, and answer some more questions. User provisioning, first of all. Yeah, so there's a whole area of the platform. There are a couple actually on an app level. You have sort of team management here. You have full control, and there's a lot you can do with users and roles in Runway. So teams like using this for sort of limiting access to Play Console, for example, not having to do the whole account provisioning there, which wastes a lot of time for your platform folks or your core team or IT admins. So you can give folks scoped access in Runway based on roles. There's a whole kind of permissions matrix. We also have automations. If you do want to provision access to Play Console, you can turn these on. for different folks and map them to roles and have Runway automate that. Of course, we support SSO SAML. Active Directory sync is coming soon. So a lot of ways to make it really easy. Because we are this sort of collaboration tool, we want to make it easy for different team members to easily come into Runway, get access to the info they need, not have access to the stuff that they shouldn't have access to. Make that a lot easier than certainly for the play console part of the process, how it is now, but also for your other tools as well. There's also an organization level kind of user management system for admins. So you can add people to different teams. And finally, the release pilot list actually in the middle here is where you can manage that rotation of release drivers if you want. So you'll see them here. There are little annotations actually missing here where it will show you kind of who's on deck, who's up next, that kind of thing. And of course, you can shuffle people around as well. Cool. More questions I can answer in the last few minutes here. I want to let people go on time. In terms of getting started, trying this out, see how it kind of looks and feels for your team. There are a few ways to go about it. The most common one is to start connecting some core integrations. We have a nice sort of onboarding flow in the product, which makes it easy. And you can start things in a read-only mode where Runway is kind of seeing the outside world. It can see the state of your apps and build in Play Console and your rollouts, and it can see what's going on in Jira and GitHub. And as you start to understand, like, this is how it's fitting in, this is how it's reflecting our workflow, you can start adding some more of the kind of advanced integrations and turning on some more automations. So definitely can be like a staged thing as you start understanding kind of how does this look and feel with my team's own stuff in there. And we have a free plan, of course, or not of course, but it's worth calling out. So don't need to worry about the price tag if you want to get in there and get started. We have a nice core feature set, and you can sign up self-serve, go through the onboarding flow, and get going that way. Question on pricing. We don't charge per user, except for, I should clarify, the free plan is capped in terms of right users, but our pricing is not user-based. It's per app. So you get unlimited teammates in there and unlimited builds as well. We actually don't do any kind of usage-based pricing. The European server question was a popular one at DroidCon. We can. We're in AWS, and so for folks that need it, we will spin up instances in Europe. Generally, we'll do that for larger teams, larger contracts, as a sort of enterprise feature. But it is a possibility. Yeah. Cool. I'll stick around here for the last 3 minutes. And while I do, thank you all so much for joining. Hopefully interesting and helpful, and paints kind of more of a picture of what we've been building, where we fit in to your stack, some of the value we can provide. We would be very happy to give a one-on-one demo to any teams that are interested. A little bit more kind of informal. We can answer specific questions about your team's toolchain and use case, and that kind of stuff. So feel free to reach out. There's a way to do that on the website. And once again, recording will go out probably later today or tomorrow. You can share that with your team, rewatch it if you like. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Thanks again to the DroidCon folks. Definitely reach out if you have more questions or want to see some more. And really appreciate your time and questions along the way.